Strategies is with us, who is the facilitator of the Community Oversight Advisory Committee, and Ms. Erica Warren, who is the facilitator of the Historic Albina Advisory Board. We want to encourage everyone to, as much as you can, keep your cameras on, is our request for the meeting. We understand that sometimes you got to step away and things transpire, so we fully understand that. But because of today's action and activity, we'd really love to see your faces. So welcome into the space. And for others who are onlookers and or who are listening, let me let you know that this is not a public meeting, but it is a meeting that is open to the public. And what that means is that you have the opportunity, public person, to listen in to and to watch the process, the public process, transparent process to address what's going on in the Rose Quarter. We welcome your comments and we welcome your engagement in the meeting. There will be a space where there will be opportunity for public comment during our process today, and we encourage you to take advantage of those opportunities where they are provided. And I'm going to pass this on to Ms. Erica Warren, who will keep us moving forward.
Thanks, Dr. Holt. Next slide, Ms. Natalie. Thank you. We've got an action-packed agenda as always. Thank you for your commitment to this process, being here with us this afternoon. We're going to have a little bit of an introduction. We're going to do a project update. We know that there's been some questions around all of these moving parts and getting to a covered decision. And so we're happy to have some members of the governor's office with us to provide some update in the midst of that. We'll then, as Dr. Holt mentioned, we're going to have an opportunity for public comment. As with our pattern, we're going to ask that you keep your comments to 1 minute, and we will be happy to hear from you. There are plenty of other opportunities to engage online, written, and by phone to give us your input. We're going to talk about how we got to the hybrid 3 cover design. And then we'll dig deeper into the schedule implications, costs, some of the questions that you all have been asking over the last meeting. And then we're going to do the really exciting work of diving into the cover recommendation before we close our time together today. Next slide, please. You all are pros at this, but I'm going to give us a reminder. Remember, your voice matters, particularly today. We want to hopefully come to some consensus, so we're going to need to hear from all of you. As we know you always do, please speak your truth. Your authentic representation is what we need to bring us all to an endpoint, a collaborative effort here. We ask that you listen for understanding. This is a passionate process, as we've said in the past, and oftentimes we have difference of opinion, but we ask you to listen to deal with the issues, not the people, because we're all hopefully working towards the same goal of making sure that there is opportunity, there's some restorative economic justice, that there's benefit for the communities that we're serving here. In a passionate process like this, there's going to be some discomfort. So we want you to acknowledge and experience the discomfort. And discomfort is often where we grow. So we ask that you remain respectfully engaged. Part of that is, if you have the opportunity to, please leave your cameras on while we're engaging. We understand you may have to step away, but we'd love to see you and interact with you as close to a personal experience as possible. And then expect and accept non-closure. We hope to come to consensus today around the highway cover issue, but there are many other issues that we are dealing with and bringing restorative energy and efforts to the Rose Quarter area. So we understand we can't solve everything tonight. So we ask you to be prepared for that. Next slide, please. With that, I will turn it in the hands of our very capable and illustrious leader, the project director, Ms. Megan Channel.
Thank you, Erica, and good evening, Executive Steering Committee, Historic Albina Advisory Board, and Community Oversight Advisory Committee. Tonight really marks an important milestone in the project, and I just want to take a moment and just continue to express great appreciation to each and every one of you for the time and the energy that you've put forth to get us into this space. So thank you. We're continuing the work of the Independent Highway Cover Assessment Team. I don't know, it looks like the slides got dropped here, but if the slides were showing, you would see a rendering that was previously shared in their presentation, just to really demonstrate the realm of possibility and the opportunity that we have moving forward with the Rose Quarter project, building that canvas for a future community development and economic opportunity. So tonight we have an ask. We're asking you to consider a recommendation for the highway cover design, and specifically focused in on hybrid 3, which would, depending on your recommendation today, ultimately be carried forward into the development of the I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement Project. So next slide. Our goal in this meeting tonight is to get you as much information as we can to inform your recommendation. And then that recommendation, as we've communicated along the way, will ultimately be taken to the Oregon Transportation Commission for direction. So before we get started on that, I thought it'd be helpful just to touch base on, like, what do we mean when we say recommendation or direction? So tonight's recommendation, again, that would be carried forward to the Oregon Transportation Commission, would be a recommendation to begin that detailed design work for the highway cover design concept. The recommendation tonight does not mean that we go straight to construction of what you see tonight. We have a lot more work to do, a lot more study to do before we get there. But the recommendation would signal a start to that work to ultimately get to construction. So the recommendation means that you would like to advance the design. We're at about a 5% design level with the highway cover concept today. And in order to understand more of the details, we would need to do more design work. The recommendation also would mean that you'd like to proceed with the technical analysis and environmental review of the highway cover design, and that we would go through, the federally required environmental process with Federal Highway Administration before that design is finalized. And then the recommendation also means that we take on more robust cost estimating to inform a finance plan and the diversity plan that's really focused in on the disadvantaged business enterprise and workforce program. And then with this recommendation, it would also give us the direction to initiate any necessary intergovernmental agreements to move forward with partner agencies. So much of this work would happen over the course of the next year, and we would need that recommendation in order to move forward with this. So we'll come back to these next steps as we get to the cover recommendation, but I just really wanted to frame that up as we start the conversation today. So with that, I'll pause on general project update. I know we've got a lot more to come on how we got to hybrid 3, kind of digging into your questions around cost and schedule, but as a framer, I will pause there.
Thank you very much. We're going to prepare then for our public comment moment. If you could bring up the slides for that. Excellent. It's been mentioned already by Ms. Erica that there are plenty of opportunities to engage, a variety of ways, through email, through direct phone calls, etc. For those who'd like to make comment today, we're asking you to comment directly related to the community groups that are gathered and the agenda of the day. You're going to have 60 seconds to do so. The phone number is 971-247-1195. You've got your meeting ID of 846-0469-0996 and a passcode of 941402. Ms. Natalie, I believe you are going to walk us through specifics and particulars. I turn it over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Holt. A few reminders, if you are coming in, watching us on the live stream, please remember to mute your computer to minimize background noise. And we will go ahead and move forward with the public comments. I thought we had one in the waiting room, but I am not seeing that person there anymore. So I guess we will leave it open. Reminder, speakers will have up to 1 minute to make their comment, and at time they will be muted. And we have other options to submit public comments that are listed on the agenda. The person we saw earlier is not in the waiting room anymore, and we don't have anyone else there right now.
Well, thank you very much. We won't belabor. We will keep things moving along.
Thank you, Dr.
And then, thank you. Let me just reiterate that if you did not get a chance to participate in public comment, we certainly want to hear from you. Your thoughts, your voice is important, so please take advantage of the other opportunities to do so. Okay, I would like to introduce a member of the governor's staff, Shannon Singleton, and she's going to talk to us about how we got to hybrid 3.
Thank you, Dr. Holt, and thank you, committee members, for making some space on your agenda tonight. It's great to be back here with you, and I've got a couple of slides to just run through with you all the process was used in the convening that the governor pulled together and spoke to you all about at your last meeting regarding how we got to hybrid 3. Perfect, thank you. So who was at the table? Governor Brown, and then Commissioner Hardesty, Vega Peterson, and Council President Peterson, as well as a number of community representatives, including folks representing Albina Vision Trust, NAACP, Coalition of Black Men. Director Strickler was also there, and there was some overlap, as you all are aware, with the tables here. I will say there was staff in the room as well, not as participants, but to help staff the electeds in the room. And also Nolan Leinhart was able to provide some support and presentation around the technical aspects of the discussion. So both he and Director Strickler were able to share some of those pieces during the governor's convenings. We can go to the next slide. We as the governor's office, so it was the folks who were in that slide, and then the governor's staff, myself and Kristen Sheeran, who is on the ESC here with you all. Where we started, can you go back? Thank you. So really the governor's convening, the table started with the work that you all had already gone through. We knew that the ESC had initially preferred hybrid 1. HAAB was looking at scenario 4, and ICA workshop participants preferred scenario 5, and the ICA open house participants preferred scenario 5. So the governor's table really started from where you all had identified some priorities and looked at these 3 different scenarios in the first convening. Because there had been some stuckness to the process, that's why the governor convened these groups to say, how can we really get down and drill down into the specific elements that are preferred or priorities for everybody who was participating at that table? So we started with looking at the values. What were people bringing into this conversation about the Rose Quarter? And really found a lot of alignment there. When we got into the specific elements, they included things like walkability, street and bicycle connectivity, air and noise quality, maintaining the existing contract. One of the things I think that was came out quickly and became very important part of the conversation was too long of a delay would trigger the need for ODOT to issue a new procurement process and potentially jeopardize the existing work that was moving forward. We also looked at buildable land and traffic impacts. The other piece that came up naturally in conversation was just values that people had or ideas around the community development conversation that folks want to make sure is shared with local governments who will lead that next table. So we really captured those as they were coming up in conversation to make sure we can have those show up in the IGA and some of the work moving forward. There was also early agreement that the school, that Harriet Tubman Middle School, should be relocated, and really looking at what are options to relocate within the same neighborhood and stay in that district. The technical table was convened. That included staff from PBOT as well as ICA team and ODOT staff, and I believe some technical staff from Metro to really further develop Hybrid 3. Once we had landed on those elements that you saw in the last slide, it was how now do we get to these and get some more definition under them to be able to bring something forward with more detail. You all heard from the governor directly not last week, but at the last meeting, that she was supportive of Hybrid 3 and moving that forward as her recommendation to the OTC. And she came and presented to you all on the 3rd. Some of the next steps for the governor's convening. Go to the next slide. Thank you. So the discussions on relocating Harriet Tubman Middle School, they've begun. It's a multi-tiered process. Some initial discussions really happened just this last week, looking at financing options so that we could start to understand what is the universe of opportunity to fund a relocation of the school. During the governor's convening, she also asked the local jurisdiction who own land in Albina to really look at land inventory and assess options for relocation. And Portland Public School has shared that they had done some due diligence on a few sites and really we want to now reconcile those two land inventories so we understand what the options really are for relocating the school. The other piece is an intergovernmental agreement. And so that's the part that we're working on right now and expect to have a draft to work through with partners towards the end of this week. This IGA is about solidifying the agreements that were made at this table around Hybrid 3. But again, some of those community values about the community redevelopment table, as well as maintaining the existing contract and the good work that's being done to support people into good paying jobs right now. And then the governor's recommendation will go to the OTC for their September meeting. I thought I saw a hand, but Dr. Holt, I'm going to turn it over to you for that piece of facilitation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Shannon, for taking us through that portion. Let me encourage all of the committee members, here's your space, to begin to get clarity, to ask questions. We've got minutes designated to make sure that there's clarity around this moment. So, Estelle, I see your hand. Still on mute.
So just how much conversation at this table was about what would go on the covers, who would decide what went on the covers, and who would be governing what went on the covers? Was there a fair amount of discussion about that at this table?
There was not. It was early on agreed that this was not the table to have that discussion, but naturally some of that came out in people's feedback, but again, really focused on capturing folks' values. And I'll give an example of one that was mentioned at the table was being sure that whomever convenes the redevelopment conversation and what goes on top of the caps is inclusive of the diversity of voices within the Black community. That there has to be broad representation there at that table was one of the values that folks had. So no more detail than that sort of kind of higher level value statement.
Okay, and also at that table, were there any mock-ups or was there anything presented that hasn't been seen by any of the committees here?
That is a great question. Because I'm not on these committees, I would look to my colleague Kristen or somebody at ODOT to share that or to answer that question.
I don't believe so. What I don't know is there were technical teams that met, and I don't know to what extent they may have moved outside the bounds of some of the hybrid options that the ICA had presented as part of that sort of technical exploration they were doing. Megan, do you have an answer to that? I think you may have been part of the conversation.
Yeah, I can dive into this one. So Estelle, we were only looking at the parameters of what the independent cover assessment team prepared. So it was scenario 1, scenario 4, scenario 5, and then the hybrids 1, 2, and 3. And so at the last joint meeting just 2 weeks ago, we sort of went through some of those details of hybrid 3 to summarize our understanding of kind of the conversations and different areas of priority that were happening around the governor's table.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Others, feel free to raise your hand. Mr. Posey.
Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you now. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm not sure whether it's appropriate to bring this up on how we covers, but let me just back up a minute and say I want to thank the governor and Shannon and your staff and all of you all bringing this thing together. You know, we were the intelligence before you guys intervened in this thing. Nobody else will probably say that, but I'm very pleased that you all stepped in and, you know, this project. But that said, in the last meeting, and maybe I'm getting old, I don't know, my memory isn't as good as I would like it to be, but there was Dr. Richards who talked about a strategic plan that would encompass or give us an overview of you know, many of the aspects that sort of it looks like loose ends, and I'm not sure if that's going to be encompassed in the IGA or whatever, but
Mr. Posey? Mr. Posey?
Yes, yes.
James?
Are you going to intervene? You going to shut me off for that?
No, not at all. It's hard for us to hear you. You're kind of echoing. And so I want to make sure your comments are being clearly communicated. No, I'm not cutting you, buddy.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, you know, you cut me off all the time, so I wouldn't be surprised at that. But anyway, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me okay now?
It's still there's a background echo, and so we're getting the words, but they're kind of echoing some.
Yeah. I'm gonna get off this here and go to another computer. It might be in my computer, my technical stuff in the computer, but I'm concerned about what Dr. Richards, you remember Dr. Richards talked about this overall strategic plan, and I think
Yes, sir.
Joey Graham agreed that we need to have a comprehensive look at how do we, you know, really apply sort of justice in a strategic plan, and maybe it's not talking about it. Shannon is not talking about it. You're not talking about it, and Brendan is not talking about it. You all key people. And I'm concerned with whether or not that input really registered with you all, that we need an overall strategic plan to put all these pieces together. That's the bottom line. You get the gist of that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We're capturing notes also.
Okay.
We're capturing the notes.
Yeah, I'm gonna get off and get into another computer, which will give me probably more clarity in my presentation. But at the end of the day, to me, that was a big piece of what we did the last time we met, and I'm not hearing anybody talk about it at all. Maybe because nobody can talk about it, but please let me know what's going on with that. Somebody.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you. The overall strategic plan and making sure that that's something that gets thought about, talked about, brought into this space, and making sure that that becomes prioritized. So thank you. Jana, I see your hand up. Jana Jarvis.
Thank you, Dr. Holt. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Thank you. I have a number of comments to make, so hopefully you'll give me a couple of minutes here. I appreciate the fact that the governor convened a group of stakeholders to come up with a compromise in this discussion. From the Oregon Trucking Association's perspective, we have been at the table because this project, that section of freeway at the Rose Quarter is eminently important to us. And that section of the freeway doesn't just belong to the city of Portland or Multnomah County or Metro. It impacts the economy of the entire state, all the activity that goes to the port, all the businesses located along that Columbia corridor, for example. All of that is dependent on access. And so it was that reason that our members agreed to the transportation package 4 years ago and raised their taxes 53%, which all of you have heard me say in the past. So we feel very strongly about the roadway there. Less impactful to us was what the cover was going to look like, except for the following concerns. And so I just want you to know that it isn't that we're opposed to a cover or that we're opposed to option 3 particularly, but it's premature to look for our support in this. There are a lot of unanswered questions. For example, I haven't seen any cost estimates for option 1, for hybrid option 3, no clear understanding about what additional cost would be for this. Don't have any concept of how we're planning to pay for the cover. I don't know if the expectation is that that'll be paid for. It will be an ODOT expense. And if that's Highway Trust Fund dollars, then a third of those dollars come from the trucking industry. The other, I'm curious to know if the city of Portland or Multnomah County or Metro intend to contribute anything to the cost of that cover. The other concern I have about hybrid option 3 is that it reduces the outside shoulder on that stretch of freeway. That section of freeway has 3.5 times more crashes than the statewide average. So we're talking about building a tunnel through an urban center. So if we only had a 4-foot shoulder on one side, it would be very difficult to clear accidents and certainly challenging for emergency vehicles to respond. Again, that would further the flow of slowing the flow of traffic in one of the nation's worst bottlenecks. And the whole reason we're fixing that section of freeway, hopefully, is to reduce congestion there, not to create opportunities for additional congestion. So I think there was also some talk about who's going to pay those costs. We're talking a lot about restorative justice here, but those decisions were made decades ago, and they certainly weren't made by truckers or passenger vehicle owners. So my expectation is that the state will feel more of a burden to contribute to some of that cost. And then my last question is, there's been a lot of discussion about the air quality at Harriet Tubman. And I, quite frankly, somebody can explain this to me, but I'm quite confused about why we're concerned about the air quality at Harriet Tubman next to the freeway, but we're not the least bit concerned about the air quality on the development over the freeway. So with all of that, with a number of unanswered questions, certainly it'll be difficult for me to find support for this hybrid option 3 right now. Would love to see some of those answers. Thank you for your time.
Can you hear me now? Yeah, okay. Thank you, Jana. I don't know if anyone wanted to respond at the moment or if we just want to keep gathering.
I'll just jump in really quickly. Jana, for the cost estimates, we are going to dive into hybrid 3 details today of those costs and kind of the driver for the cost. So getting more of that. And then in terms of the cost estimates for the other scenarios, those are included in the reports provided by the independent cover assessment team. But I'd be happy to follow up with you separately to make sure that you're getting that specific information highlighted and drawn out. I know there's a lot of information, so can pull that out for you.
Well, I appreciate that, Megan. I printed all of that information out and I've studied that book, and I still don't have clarity on what the cost differentials are. But the other concern, of course, is who's paying for it. And that question has yet to be answered. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
And there's a couple of things that I would say. One is there's a piece of the next steps that includes looking at the financing plan and what are things that our federal partners can bring to the table in addition to what the state is bringing to the table. I also think it's important to say that I want to ask us to be careful about our comments. I can appreciate that there may be some disagreement on how and who's responsible for restorative justice. But if you're sitting in this room and you benefit from white supremacy culture, I would ask that you be cautious about how you frame what restorative justice and undoing harm to the Black community.
Thank you. Did anyone want to respond also to James Posey's comments in regard to the strategic planning? I didn't want to skip past that. I was trying to wait for him to get back in, and I don't see if he's back in.
He back.
Okay. Oh, I see now. Did
We're
anyone
having
want
a
to
stare
respond?
off. I don't want to not respond. I just don't think I'm the right person to respond. I think that is probably folks who are more regularly at this table, but if there's something that I can be helpful with in that conversation, I'm happy to be a support.
Can we get
It
some
might be helpful to
clarification on-
restate his comments, so he was.
One second. I'm sorry. We'll, again, keep using that hand raise feature. That'll help me to be able to navigate the room. I appreciate it very much. So, Kristen and then John Washington.
Dr. Holt, I was just going to suggest that since so many of us had, I think, a hard time understanding Mr. Posey when he was speaking because of the technical interference with the connection, if somebody understood, has clarity on his question and could drop it in the chat, we might be able to chime in and help.
Well, thank you very much. James, you're back. So if you could say in about, 2 minutes or so, reiterate.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay now?
Perfect.
Can everybody hear me? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to invest in a different computer, I guess. I got this Mac, but hey, the bottom line is that everybody seems to be dancing around the need for a comprehensive look at how we put all these various parts together. In the last meeting, we talked about things like, Tubman, and we talked about many of the technical aspects, but no one seems to wants to grab the mantle for establishing a comprehensive look at how we apply, restorative justice to this option, this hybrid 3, an overlay in quantitative and qualitative terms. And, that's how, you build highways, you have benchmarks, you have goals, you have everything strategically laid out and how you accomplish where you're trying to go. I don't see that. For example, I don't see in this meeting, the Office of Civil Rights. They've never been involved in this process. I think they showed up at one meeting. That's a huge issue, civil rights and how we apply, how do we get there? Now, we made progress with putting Raymore in charge of a portion of the contract, but there's other huge aspects of restorative justice that's not going to be addressed. Even when you look at AVT, nothing quantitative and qualitatively has been discussed. And that goes back to the trucker person talking about cost, et cetera, et cetera. Somebody has to be in a position to help us navigate to a point where we can reasonably look for an outcome that's going to be successful for this entire project. I don't see it. Maybe somebody can address it.
Thank you very much, sir, for recapping that. Kristen, was that helpful, and were you going to respond at all?
Very helpful. Thank you for restating that. And I'll do my best to give a response and then certainly invite others with their perspectives. Mr. Posey, I think you've encapsulated so perfectly exactly the work that still needs to be done to truly realize the vision for what this project can become for the community. I think at this point, everybody's been focused on sort of, if you will, almost sort of step one of the process, which is can we align around the design considerations for the CAP such that Megan and her team at ODOT can move forward and begin some of the actual design work for building the cap, the question of what gets built on it and what gets built around it to realize that community vision, who owns it, what gets placed there, that's absolutely critical. And I think the governor's been clear that is a conversation that has to be led by the community and by the city and local jurisdictions, not by the state, not by ODOT. But it is part of the work that absolutely has to come next, and that's the conversation that falls out of this, provided we can all come to some kind of agreement that allows sort of the technical work around building the cap and only the cap, to begin moving forward as these next stage conversations, arguably the most important conversations, can start to begin.
Thank you. Any other comments from any of the staff? Moment for, I don't know if Megan or if Brendan wanted to weigh in at all.
No, I feel like Kristen said it well. We look forward to kind of being a partner. And I say we, I'm speaking specifically as the project director, but a partner in that broader community development and visioning, recognizing that we are one piece of a greater opportunity.
Let me just say, Brendan said a couple of meetings back, restorative justice is not what ODOT does. He was real clear about that, and I believe him. No one stepped up to the plate to talk about restorative justice in this process, with the exception of Dr. Richards and maybe some input from me and a few other people. But at the end of the day, it's not going to happen unless we're intentional about it. And ODOT, since this is your project and where money's coming from, somebody's going to have to take the mantle of leadership to move this project in a direction that we can have parallel courses in which we can find restorative justice while we're building this expansion. Somebody's got to do that. Who's going to do it? Tell me.
Well, I will say this, Mr. Posey, restorative justice is a value that's established from the Executive Steering Committee, and that would drive and is supposed to be driving all of our work. So hopefully the values of the work has been communicated to the COAC and to the Historic Albina Advisory Board. But in terms of the specific strategy talked about, that's been the ongoing work. So I do want to at least introduce that it has been brought into the space, but the work around it to define it is what has to be that next, as what you're leaning in on. So appreciate that. John, you were about to make a statement, and then I'm going to go to the hands that were raised.
Well, I wasn't going to make a statement. The statement I could have made at that time was I never could understand what James Posey is saying, but now that I understand him, he was made it real clear the second time around. So thank you, James, for that. I appreciate it. But, I may have a little difference in the view about that last statement he made. I don't necessarily think that ODOT needs to be in charge of that aspect of it. I think we need to reveal to ourselves what this justice looks like, and within our own house. I don't think white benevolence is what's going on here. I think that this part of it, we need to drill down on and get busy about. They can't give us nothing in that part of it. We need to tell them what it is that we need as a justice. It's like, I wish that I can go into the courtroom and the judge will give me everything that I need when I'm in a situation like that. But that's not the case, generally. We got to stand up and say what it is that we want from this process. So that's just my comment about that piece of it.
Appreciate it. Thank you, sir. And now we will go to Estelle.
I just wanted to say that I kind of think these conversations are being had. They're just not being had here. I believe the letter that we saw from the City of Portland Metro and the county kind of reveals that there are plans being made for next steps of what that's going to look like, and it's just not happening here. What restorative justice is going to look like after Hybrid 3 is approved and what that governance will look like, and already kind of implying what structure should go on top of the covers. I mean, time is marching on, seemingly, is what I'm saying. It's just not happening here. We're having conversations and we're talking and we're throwing ideas around, like we still are a part of the process and we have opinions and we're a community contributing la-di-da, but, and I'm sorry if that's, I'm sorry to put it that way. I am not being sarcastic or anything like that, but I think there is a structure in place. I think that there is. It's just not happening here. And I'm sorry to, to put it like that. I'm just kind of, I'm kind of curious, I was kind of curious about that. Because that's how Hybrid 3 came about, right? Was the same people that sent us this letter saying that, hey, we think this is how it should go. And here we are, hey, pick Hybrid 3. And so now they're saying, hey, this is how restorative justice should look like, you people wronged by this. And we're still here saying, hey, these are our ideas. This is how we feel. This is how we should think. But this is this right here. And, they're saying, let's be honest about what happened in Albina. Oh, that's the bad guy. But let's be honest about what happened with the Interstate Corridor Project too. And the 3 government agencies who sent this letter, they were there. And so yeah, let's talk about what happened to Albina. Let's talk about it. Because y'all were there too. And it kind of makes me a little bit nervous that the same people that did that now are marching on and they're going to tell us what restorative justice looks like. It was just real upsetting. So to answer your question, Mr. Posey, that's kind of how I would answer it. I would say, hey, so I'm very sorry to say that, but I kind of feel a little bit disheartened by it, because I see us here, we're putting in all this effort and all this time and all this talk thinking that we're doing something, and
Yeah. Thank you, Estelle. Thank you. We appreciate your comments. Bryson.
Yeah, so I think in a bunch of these discussions we've talked about, the costs, who's gonna pay for it, where's the money gonna come from, that kind of thing. But from my understanding of what we're determining here, we've had 6 scenarios that we've been looking at, all within about 10% of each other as far as cost is concerned. And so it seems to me that from our perspective, from what we're being asked to decide between when we're looking at the various scenarios, the whether or not the cost is over the original amount doesn't seem to factor in much here. It seems like if we were in a point where we were really concerned about the cost, we would actually be asking the team to go back and basically redesign and come up with new ideas that are significantly different than what we've got. And I haven't seen anything from how any of the hybrid scenarios differ from the scenarios that we have cost estimates to make me suspect that the hybrid scenarios will be significantly outside of the range of the scenarios that have cost estimates. And so it definitely seems to me that as far as our decision picking between these scenarios, cost isn't really a factor.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Are there any other comments or questions in relationship to specifically Hybrid 3 and Shannon's presentation on that? Okay, we're going to go further in our conversation in regard to Hybrid 3. And some of those questions that came up will be addressed and answered. We're going to ask you to lean in And if you want to capture notes, please do, and be prepared to engage in dialogue around it. As introduced at the beginning of our time, today's goal is to take us into a space of being ready to make a recommendation around Hybrid 3. So we want to make sure that you've got the information you need to do that. And that's specifically to the Historic Outbound Advisory Board and to the Executive Steering Committee. Within your charter and charge is this specific work, the great work of the Community Oversight Advisory Committee. John L. Bell is going to be talking about some opportunity associated with the DBE possibilities with Hybrid 3. So Megan, back to you.
Thanks, Dr. Holt. Natalie, I see you pulling up the slides here. Thank you, thank you. If you go to the next slide here, again, I know at the last meeting and today there's lots of questions around cost and schedule. So I'm going to start with schedule first, focusing in on Hybrid 3. I think I'll say the punchline first, and then I'll go to the details here. But with Hybrid 3, we can provide the improvements in Hybrid 3 through an efficient schedule, streamlined schedule that allows us to revise the needed design and technical and environmental analysis at the same time that we work to incorporate those components into the full project design and with the early work packages. So I'll jump into this here. And what are you seeing on the screen? So I'll just highlight that as we talk about the project, we are actually looking at it as 3 separate and distinct packages. We're looking at a construction package to the north, which we reference as early work package A. So that's on the left side of your screen. That really includes the I-5 mainline improvements that are north of the central highway cover area, and that the improvements that connect to the 405 interchange on the north end of the project. We're also looking at a construction package to the south, which we reference as early work package B. So it's on the right side of your screen. That looks at the I-5 mainline improvements to the south of the highway cover area and connecting to the I-84 interchange. And then in the center, shown in yellow, we're looking at the kind of main construction package, or the central construction package, which includes the highway cover. So really the area that we're talking about when we talk about Hybrid 3 or different scenarios or the independent highway cover work, it's that segment in yellow. And so again, that includes the highway covers, the I-5 mainline improvements underneath, and then the surrounding local street improvements. So as it relates to schedule, we know for Hybrid 3 that we do have about a 10 to 12 month timeline of delay to conduct some redesign work, some technical analysis, and environmental review for Hybrid 3. This, however, can be done concurrently with the design for early work packages A and B. And so that allows us to keep moving with the design of those. And I think the significant point here is that it allows us to start construction of those early work packages in 2023. So that helps us keep us on track with our project schedule, but also with our DBE, Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, and our workforce program on those packages. So jobs in 2023 as we had planned. The final design and construction for the central work package does get pushed out because we do have that 10 to 12 month delay, as does the end of the construction for the project. But again, with this approach, we can do the concurrent work to achieve the jobs now in 2023, as well as incorporating a new highway cover design that maximizes land on the highway cover. So again, the concurrent work means that a delay of only 10 to 12 months doesn't have significant implications on the DBE and workforce program. Actually, you'll hear in just a moment how it actually increases some of those opportunities. And again, getting shovels in the ground on the early work packages in 2023 is still a priority and a possibility with Hybrid 3. So as it relates to cost, I'll go to that next. Natalie, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, please. So before I jump to cost, I'll just share really the comparison of costs that we've done. So when we reference the baseline project, That is the project that received its federal environmental approvals and was costed in our cost to complete report back in January of 2020. So that's kind of the current project or baseline project. And then as we've gone through this independent cover assessment process and the governor's led table and conversations here, comparing that now to hybrid 3. So the difference here, the baseline project included 2 separate highway covers. They're really intended for roadways, bike lanes, sidewalks, and using the new space on top of the highway as open space. Hybrid 3 expands upon that. It's one continuous cover. It's longer, it's wider, it's able to accommodate 2 to 3 story buildings throughout, and also relocates that southbound off-ramp to the south of the highway covers. So the features of hybrid 3 do achieve what we've heard from you as priorities around maximizing space, developable space. If you go to the next slide, please. But focus on maximizing developable space, completing a street grid, and then minimizing construction delays. So as we get to cost with the next slide, I'm comparing here the baseline project cost, again, as reported in the cost to complete report, which was assumed to be the 715 to 795 million. And again, this included the open space highway cover uses, where in a few spot locations, there could be 2 to 3 story buildings put in limited locations. So that's the 715 to 795 does reflect that cost. I'll note that this the 715 to 795 million is also based on a 15% design level. So a little bit more design than what we've got for hybrid 3. So on the right side of your screen, you'll see the hybrid 3 costs. So hybrid 3 is expected to cost about 1.18 to 1.25 billion. In my next slide, I'll cover these main cost increase drivers. But again, it does include the cost to increase the length and the width of the highway covers, make them buildable for 2 to 3 stories throughout. And then there would be an added premium on top of that cost if there was an interest in making the highway covers buildable to 5 to 6 stories. So that's at another 172 million to 500 million, depending on the structural requirements. But again, reflects a combined range that was identified by the independent cover assessment team and the ODOT project team. So as we're looking at this, it's important to note that hybrid 3 cost is based on a preliminary 5% design level. So these numbers will change. It's the best guess that we have based on the concept level today. And I'll also note that as we're comparing these side by side, they're not a true apples to apples comparison, but it's the best information that we have available. Again, with the baseline cost to complete report being done at a 15% design, more information informing those costs versus conceptual costs prepared for hybrid 3 at this point. So the next slide, why the cost increase, really is a number of different factors. So first is highway covers. They are wider, they are longer with hybrid 3. Again, the baseline project assume open space covers with potential for a few 2 to 3 story buildings in spot locations, whereas hybrid 3 has the longer covers and you could put a 2 to 3 story building anywhere on that cover. Hybrid 3 also includes relocating the southbound off-ramp. So there are some added costs around that. Reconnecting the street grid while achieving walkability does add construction elements and cost to the project. Flint Street in particular was one that was not being rebuilt as part of the project or the baseline project with hybrid 3 that would have the ability to connect across the highway cover. The cost also accounts for the design rework that would need to be done in that 10 to 12 months that I just talked about in the project schedule, technical studies, the environmental revaluation work, as well as the engineering work. It also accounts for the right-of-way purchases that would be needed. And then given the schedule, also assumes an escalation in cost with moving out the timeline of construction for the highway cover work. We in the baseline assumptions had assumed that the midpoint of construction would be 2025, and so costed dollars to 2025 value. With the 10 to 12 month delay, shifting out the main package construction, we're assuming a 2027 midpoint of construction dollar value. So there is there is 2 years of escalation accounted for in those costs. So with that, Janelle, I think I'm turning it over to you for a quick DBE overview.
Terrific. And Dr. Holt, I do note that there are a number of questions on that prior point. So I don't know if you want to take those now or wait until I'm done with this section here.
Why don't we jump in on some of those questions, Janelle, and then we'll have a chance. That way we can keep the information clear for each piece.
Sure. Happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We have Janet Jarvis as the first hand that's up.
Thank you, Dr. Holt. Megan, you made a couple of comments. If you go back to the slide that showed the 1.3 billion for the cost of the cover, but it talked about around the high sevens or low 800 millions for the cost to complete, or 715 to 795 million. What is that cost to complete report? What does that cover?
So the cost to, oh, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead, Jana.
What does that mean? I mean, that's ODOT speak. So what does that mean? What are you saying to us there?
Yeah, so the cost to complete report, and thanks for asking that question. The cost to complete report was something that was put together in January of 2020. It actually was a requirement of House Bill 2017 to do an estimate of the project in full as we knew it then at a 15% design level. So the 715 to 795 includes all of the costs for the project based on the baseline project. So that was the I-5 mainline improvements. So the auxiliary lanes on I-5 and the shoulders. It included the highway covers, as I described, so the 2 separate highway covers with open space uses. It included multimodal local street improvements on top of the highway covers and in the vicinity of the project area. And then it also included a the Clackamas bicycle and pedestrian bridge crossing over I-5 to the south of the highway covers. So those are kind of the main, I'd say, bucket areas covered in the cost to complete report.
So the estimate that came out in 2000 after the bill passed in 2017 was around top end 800 million cost to complete, which included some cost for a cover, correct?
Yes, it included the cost for the 2 separate highway covers that would accommodate the roadways and then open space on top with a few point locations for 2 to 3 story buildings.
And on the right hand of this screen, it's talking about the cost is now somewhere between 1.18 and 1.75 billion. And that still includes the roadway in there, correct? The freeway improvements, right?
Yep. That
Plus
still includes
the additional cost, the cost of this larger cover and the movement of the ramps and except those kinds of costs associated with it. Am I correct there?
Correct.
So in essence, we have increased the cost some 50 to 100% through hybrid option 3. Is that a fair assessment?
About 450 million would be about the increase.
Well, that's 50%. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So, and one other quick question on the southbound ramp. What does moving that southbound ramp look like? In one of our many discussions, I had a question that I didn't get answered about changing ramp configurations. And it seemed like there was a comment about shortening the ramp, making it steeper, et cetera. And I'm just trying to understand the geometry of the ramp and how that would impact heavy trucks.
Yeah, so actually, if we go back, I believe 2 slides, it shows hybrid 3. There we go. So Janet, to your question, so hybrid 3 relocates that southbound off-ramp to the south where Williams, Winning, and Wheeler come together. Today, it's currently at the Vancouver and Broadway intersection. We do believe that with some local street modifications, that we started some conversations with technical staff with City of Portland and Metro, that there are a number of options that allow us to still improve safety and operations with that ramp relocation, and actually some different options to improve the turning radii there as well, to address some of those concerns that were brought up. We have a lot more work to do, Jana. We understand this at a 5% design concept, but what I can say is that through that technical work, we feel like at a conceptual level, we have overcome some of those barriers. And now we need to do that further analysis for the system to demonstrate its functioning.
But that was the ramp change that we talked about could create problems for trucks. Am I correct in that statement?
It is the same one that was discussed at the last meeting.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to Nate McCoy.
Thank you, Stephen. Stephen Hope. Just wanted to comment and thank you again, Megan, for making it very clear and being honest around this cost impact. And I know we're trying to move towards consensus, but I appreciate you actually bringing up the true costs because, many of us know that this cost actually does matter a ton to this project. And being able to see, as Jana said earlier, who's also going to pitch in to help. Because the conversations we've been in is the feds are telling us they're trying to come up with the money, but they're not sure if they can do it alone. So I guess I hope that if we're going to get to a consensus vote today, that back to the IGA, that we have some strong language in there that certainly suggests that if we're not somehow able to, kind of bring in the money for this project, that there's some alternative path that keeps this project moving forward towards some economics for our community. And again, not to wordsmith right in the moment, but just acknowledging that. Because when I hear community people say that the cost is not a consideration at this point, that's lying to our community, and I'm a part of this community. So I appreciate Megan being honest that this delta is big. It's not little, and I just hope that if we are going to move forward with this project, that we actually have some good stopgaps on if we get too far down the line and we can't get the money, what is the alternative? Because I know design, being a former architect, that you don't go down a design path to 70, 80% and then turn a corner and start back over. So I'm just hoping that we unpackage that maybe today, Megan, just so that we can make sure that as this community really tries to recommend something, however that holds up, that we actually have these things well known and acknowledged to our community here today. Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you, Nate, for that. And what I would add as well is, we are focused in on hybrid 3 today, given the conversations. But I think it's also important to note that really any of the independent cover assessment scenarios, whether it's scenario 1, 4, 5, or any of the hybrids, would have seen a cost increase. And so just want to acknowledge that. And then it also acknowledged for our baseline cost estimate that, it's based on a 15% design. That 715 to 795, had we stayed with the project that, design that we had of the past, was still likely to change and evolve as we learned more and continued to work with the community. So I just want to put that as a framer as well, on top of the important points, Nate, that you made.
Thank you. Bryson.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, Megan ended up covering a couple of things I was about to say, which is, my comment about the cost not mattering was the cost increase is similar throughout the various scenarios that we're looking at. Not that we're having a project that's significantly more than their original project, because any of the scenarios that we've been looking at have been significantly more than what we started out with in January of 2020. And so, I think if we want to go the route of, saying, well, maybe we should go back to the original concept, then I think that's one thing. But if we're trying to pick between the various scenarios, I think we're looking at similar cost increases for all the different scenarios. And then the second piece, and Megan, you could probably clear this up pretty quick. When you're doing the future dollars, are you just assuming a 3% year-over-year inflation?
Yeah, we're actually assuming a 3.5% escalation, which is inclusive of inflation.
Double mutes are wonderful. Thanks, Bryson, for your comment. President Peterson.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. It's been a really good discussion. And I just want to remind us all that the reason we convened on every level from community to contractors to elected officials is to really have a deeper conversation, because the base assumption was not meeting the restorative justice performance metrics that we had all wanted it to meet. And so as Bryson pointed out, any of the scenarios that the ICA came up with would have increased costs, because the base scenario was not meeting any of those performance metrics that we all agreed needed to be met. So with saying that, I appreciate also, Megan, the clarity that you're providing. But I do have a quick question about the increased authority that ODOT was given under HB 3055 to do short-term financing and tolling. How does that fit into the financial plan for this project?
Yeah, President Peterson, I think you're asking a really good question. So House Bill 3055, and actually, Natalie, I might ask you to bring up my slide again that does address financing. So President Peterson, that is something that we need to look at. So for those that don't know, House Bill 3055 was passed in this past legislative session, and it does expand our, I'd say, financing sources and ability for ODOT projects with short-term bonding, looking at toll revenue. So we do have some new sources. That said, if you go to the next slide, please, Natalie. The next one, I think, will be there. Oh, and the next one. All right, there we go. So we do know that we're going to have to look at a number of different options, House Bill 3055 being one of those, but also the federal funding opportunities that are on the table, particularly around partners coming to the table and showing that coalescing around an option should we get there today. But I also don't want to lose sight of the fact that, we chose CMGC, Construction Management General Contractor approach for Rose Quarter for a reason. And that's really to capitalize on the innovation and the expertise of having a contractor in early in the design process, so that we can have that early value engineering and continue to innovate and look at ways to advance early construction work. So on top of those partnership and funding needs, we also have kind of some internal levers that we're continuing to pull to help address that funding gap. So President Peterson, I feel like I didn't directly answer your question about House Bill 3055. So I guess short answer is more work to be done on that, but it is part of the option that we're looking at the financing moving forward.
Thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions or comments? All right. Well, John L., we will now turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Hogue, and thank you, everyone, for participating. Just a reminder, the purpose of the Community Oversight Advisory Committee is to really advise the program relative to DBE and workforce diversity. And so there's always two sides of the coin. The side of the coin that we are really focused on is the cost implications relative to probable DBE opportunity. And with that, I'm going to ask our technical expert, Amber Ontiveros, to really walk everyone through as to what the preliminary data suggest in terms of the cost implications on potential DBE and workforce. Amber?
Thank you, John L. So I just want to step back for a moment and remind everyone one of the guiding principles that the COAC asked the JV and ODOT to utilize in developing the DBE and the workforce program And that was to expand DBE capacity. So as we walk through this table, that's where I want to start. So essentially, if you look at this, the estimated value on the right, and you see the $160 million in opportunities for DBEs. So that is the total amount for the existing DBE program without the cover opportunities. So let me explain what this means. So a traditional DBE program, the calculation is looking at traditional DBE opportunities. And so the COAC has seen these numbers at a previous meeting, and those values are estimated at 73 million in opportunities. Then the other thing that the program includes is it includes what's called a mini CMGC program and opportunities that includes technical assistance and mentoring by the JV and Raymore. And so those opportunities are around $58 million in priming opportunities that allows those DBEs that are in the mini CMGC program to expand and so that they can become primes. So that total amount is 131. And then the other part of the DBE program is another 29 million in opportunities where the JV and Raymore has looked within the pool of available opportunities for DBEs to expand DBEs into new scopes, into new types of services so that they can take DBEs to build them for success to become future Raymores. And that's about 160 million. So our preliminary analysis today of hybrid 3 accounts for another $100 million on top of the 160 million for hybrid 3, or $260 million in opportunities. Now, in addition to that, the COAC has had Raymore conduct essentially a workforce gap analysis that assesses the existing workforce and done a gap analysis to assess the amount of BIPOC opportunities for workforce. And we estimate that there will be an additional 50% of craft hours on top of the hours that have been calculated thus far. So we would like to come back to HAAB to provide the actual amount so that you can see the actual values once we flesh that information out with the COAC, as well as the workforce information. So that is my update right now. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Jonelle, if you will guide us through this.
And I cannot see okay, there we go. It's Mr. Steve Witter.
I don't have a question as much as a comment. I just really appreciate the efforts here. And I know, Amber, you were saying you're going to reevaluate that with a gap analysis, and I'm really excited to see what those next numbers are. I just want to remind people, this is like the floor, not the ceiling, right? So we're always going to, and I know my ODOT partners are always going to shoot for better. So just remember, these numbers are the floor, not the ceiling, in my experience. Thank you.
Other thoughts, questions, comments? I see Bryson and then Mr. James Polsey.
Yeah, just a clarifying question. So you said that it was about 100 million more for DBE contractors. That's like if we went back to that slide looking at the cost comparison, the shorter block, the original project is the one that has the $100 million less for DBE, and the current hybrid 3 has the $100 million more. Is that the comparison that's being made there?
Yeah, so essentially the total amount, if you included so in other words, with hybrid 3, the total is around 260 million, but we need to, as Megan said earlier, we need to finalize the diversity plan in concert with the COAC so that they can weigh in on the availability analysis and the types of opportunities. Yes, sir.
Well, just to caveat that a little bit, that's at the preliminary design level. And so
Yes.
Naturally, as the design is refined, those numbers become more solid. And so, I just want to caveat this by saying preliminary numbers based on what we know now. James Posey.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yep, you're coming in.
Yeah, I'm very interesting. I was listening to Steve Witter at TriMed talk about the floor, and Amber talk about these numbers, and they look like huge numbers. But for those of us who have been out here in the construction field, we know that the DBE program has never really worked across the country, and it's no different here in Oregon. We basically have had zero participation for African Americans on ODOT projects over the last 25 or 30 years. Fortunately, now we have a contractor who's already demonstrated that they have the capacity to make this DBE program really work. And I think Steve could attest to that by the virtue of the fact that we have Raymore. You all know I'm not unbiased about Raymore and my willingness to support them. But at the end of the day, we rarely see these DBE programs translate into economic capacity in the African American community. And that's just a fact. I don't need to go through a whole lot of rigmarole around it. The first time we really had any success on a DBE program was when TriMed did the Interstate Light Rail. So these numbers while they may look good, but we know, for example, when you look at the city of Portland, white women have captured all the real economic capacity on these programs. I'm just speaking real to you all right now. So we'll be very fortunate if we could get this program in place with Raymore on board to do what they typically have done and really have this program translate into some real economic capacity building for the African American community. That's just a fact. So that's why I'm so adamant about talking about how we look at restorative justice and why we don't put numbers on this, so we can really get our community in a position where it's not just a brick and mortar, but to John's point, John Washington, what about the real estate people? What about the other small Black businesses in our community? We've been devastated. We've been devastated by the absence, redlining, housing, many things in our community have put us at a huge disadvantage. So when I talk about restorative justice and having an overall plan, I'm not talking about just Raymore and the DBE program. I'm talking about something that really will empower our community to get us off the floor, because we are on the floor. John, you understand that. So I'm not just talking about construction. I'm talking about how do we get African Americans from having twice the unemployment rate as white people? Doesn't make any sense. So that's what I'm talking about. When we talk about restorative justice and a plan to make that happen, let's do that in the context of this program.
Thank you for that comment. President Peterson.
Thanks, Janelle, and thanks, Amber. I really appreciate the direction that ODOT and the COAC have worked so hard to push on. I guess what I have a question about is that within the region, we have the Construction Careers Pathway Program that I know you're all familiar with. And there seems to be a lot of agreement that the standards that are being set there are above and beyond what is being talked about at the state level. And ODOT participation in that program is there's still an open invitation. I'm wondering if there can be any analysis about how much more would be achieved for BIPOC-owned small businesses, not just DBEs, as well as workforce participation, if the basic C2, P2 floor was the new, our floor was the new floor.
So, President Peterson, so I would like to follow up on both what Mr. Posey commented and your question. So this is just a reminder for those COAC members and HAAB members that can remember Interstate Max. So the amount of the actual project value for Interstate Max was $350 million. And y'all know the impact that that project had on the Black community. This project, the total potential DBE opportunity is $260 million. So that just gives you a context. The second thing with regard to President Peterson's question, one, the COAC has required, and the JV has said absolutely, that we will disaggregate the data by race. Second, both for DBE and by workforce. And to follow up on your question, President Peterson, we have the same minority male and female goals as what is included in your career pathway. And so we will be reporting that information to the COAC, and I'm sure Posey and Joe will be asking some of the very detailed questions that you will be asking, and we would be happy to provide that information to you once construction starts and once we get many CMGCs on board.
Thank you, Amber. John Washington.
Thank you, Amber, for that too. And thank you, James, also. You know, as I go, I trudge along and I listen to these conversations, and I recognize that the construction aspect is primarily the isolated conversation. But after listening to what James asked earlier, it took me a little bit of time to sort of filter through what he was asking about restorative justice. And just something just clicked in my head as I listened to this conversation progress about the mechanics aspect of the fundamental aspect of development and that stuff and creating these covers and all that. I never seemed to hear the restorative justice conversation in harmony with this conversation. And so it's kind of difficult for me to understand how we achieve this restorative justice aspect if I can't see the parallel. In other words, if I follow the dollars, how do I follow the dollars to restorative justice? And so for me, I'm still trying to understand how does restorative justice work through these dollars? And how do we arrive at what that actually looks like on the ground? Okay. And so, and then having that conversation, because we tend to get linear in these dialogues and we stay in this linear capacity around this. And every time, excuse me, my Caucasian friends, every time Caucasian people get involved in these dialogues with us, it moves us. We seem to stay above the hot coals. We tend to skim across those coals easily from a more of a linear standpoint of view of looking at these projects, when I'm sure, I don't know about y'all in here, I'm still trying to see how the restorative justice gets down. How does it get down to the ground of restorative justice through the process? So it's just my comment that I was just assessing where I'm at with this whole thing. In order to make a decision about the cover, how do I see where the restorative justice lands in that decision?
Dr. Hope, seeing no other questions or comments, I'm turning it back over to you.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you for your last comment, Mr. Posey as well. Was there someone else? I don't want to cut you off. Having heard.
Hey, Dr. Holt.
Oh, Megan. Yeah.
No, it wasn't me, but I do have something to follow up on. And it's really going back to Jana's original question and kind of also President Peterson's question on funding gap and how do we pay for this. In the financing slide, I also don't want to lose sight of the work that we have ahead, in addition to understanding, sources of House Bill 3055 and whatnot, but looking at what is eligible under the State Highway Trust Fund. Jen, I know that you brought that up. And then what would need to be funded with other sources. So that is a clear and distinct next step ahead as well. So just didn't want to lose the opportunity to make that clear tonight.
Do we have an answer though, Megan?
I don't have an answer for you tonight, Jana, but it's work that we know that we have ahead.
Thank you.
Thanks, Megan, for clarifying that point. We do want to emphasize that the comments that are being made are not being lost. And while all things may not be able to be leaned in one specific meeting, they will not be ignored or just passed over, especially as it relates to next steps. So comments that are charging and challenging around the values already articulated within the process. Restorative justice, being able to identify what that means and specifically identifying what that then looks like and getting into the weeds of it. That's part of the work involved in the groups. And then also the heightened concern about community engagement and involvement in this work. I think those are the things that you as community members help to keep centralized and out front. Our next slides, if we can go to our next moments. We began our conversation tonight highlighting the fact that we'd be moving into, our hope was to move into a cover recommendation around Hybrid 3, and specifically with the Historic Albina Advisory Board being ready to weigh in on that. In order to do that, we would need a quorum of the members, and we do not presently have a quorum of the members in the meeting. And therefore, we will not be pushing forward with the recommendation in this meeting, but we will be circling back to establish that soon. I don't know, Erica, if you wanted to make any mention here or Megan.
Absolutely. Again, as Dr. Holt stated, it was our goal tonight to be able to move forward with having a discussion around the recommendation. In the midst of getting into the Zoom space, I received several messages, a couple with family illness and work commitments that came up last minute. So we are missing a significant number of HAAB members. But they are committed to the process, and we want to make sure that we are staying true to what we developed. It was a value to include the community voice. And so it is my commitment to reach back to HAAB members. I believe that our next step would be to call a special meeting and that I'll make sure to touch point with all of you personally to identify a time where we can get back into the path forward for the recommendation. I know that this was Megan's opportunity to share in. You all can see because of the value around community input and wanting to really center and elevate the voices of the Black community, the Historic Albina Advisory Board was going to be given the opportunity to lead the recommendation this evening, then with the Executive Steering Committee having a chance to weigh in. Since we are not at that point, I believe we will be moving forward with maybe some of the next steps. Dr. Holt.
Erica, Dr. Holt, how many folks are we missing? Because I think that information would be good to know.
Absolutely. I'll let you know. There are 12 participating HAAB members. We have 4 in the room tonight. We would need 8 to move forward with the recommendation this evening.
Okay, so it's not the ESC and the HAAB and the COAC. You're just looking at the HAAB. I'm sorry, I just needed clarification. All right.
Yes, ma'am.
The HAAB would make,
I apologize. Excuse me.
No,
Dr.
my fault. Go ahead. No, Miss Erica. Jamie.
I see Estelle with her hand raised.
I have a question. Okay. So is the cover recommendation is separate from the hybrid 3 recommendation?
No, ma'am. Those are the same. They're the same recommendation. So our goal this evening was to present the information to you and then to begin the discussion around whether or not the Historic Albina Advisory Board would recommend hybrid 3 to be moved forward to the Oregon Transportation Commission. So those are one and the same.
Okay. Okay, great. And so we still have time, right? Because I kind of felt a little pressure there with the last little comment. So I just wanted to make sure.
Indeed, based on circumstances beyond our control, we don't have enough Historic Albina Advisory Board members in the virtual space. And so to make sure that this is an equitable, that we are including those who have invested their time to this point, that we're following through with our charter, we'd be looking to include those voices. Mr. Modica, I see your hand up.
Yes, and my apologies, I had a pre-commitment, but I believe the last slide had a bullet point about pre-work. And I'm quite interested, perhaps Megan can advise on this. When would that start? Because I think that, lighting the tinder for a big fire is important. If there is pre-work opportunity, and if there are people lined up, when will that start? What's the possibility of that starting sooner than 2 years down the line or a year and a half down the line? Thank you.
Thanks for that question, Mr. Modica. We, in the schedule slide that we have, we are still targeting the early, so we're looking at early work packages, but those would be starting in 2023. So right now, 2023 is our first shovels in the ground opportunity. That said, we are continuing to evaluate what other things outside of those early work packages might we be able to begin sooner. So that's really the work of our design team and CMGC team, but today it's 2023.
And so the abandoned auto dealership buildings and possibly the Toyota property and some other properties are going to stand empty or in a disheveled manner until 2023. Is there any possibility to do some clearance work, some demolition work? You know, our community, we have people that are recyclers or scrappers. I mean, you've got the potential to generate income now.
Absolutely. That is one of the things that we're looking at as an early opportunity. So thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Modica. And I'll be sure to circle back with this group on how those conversations and thinkings about some other opportunities are coming about.
So Megan, I just would like to add just one other comment, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
So the other thing, just keep in mind that this program does include technical assistance for firms, in which case that will need to happen before we actually start construction, which is later next year.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? And to President Peterson's, yeah.
Yeah, just in response as well to President Peterson's question, just wanted to say to the entire group, we wanted to make sure that we are staying true to the process and the charters for both the Historic Albina Advisory Board as well as the Executive Steering Committee support and promote the elevation of the voices of the Historic Albina Advisory Board. And so the process was that the HAAB would weigh in in regards to this recommendation. And then that would be taken to the Executive Steering Committee, where they would then make a recommendation based on input from the HAAB. So just wanted to clarify that for the process as to why not having quorum for the HAAB tonight would require for us to have a special gathering.
You said exactly what I was going to say. You know what? We should work together. I'm thinking that possibly we probably have a symbiotic kind of thing happening. I see you, Mr. Posey, and I see you, Mr. Washington. So Mr. Posey and then Mr. Washington in that order.
Yeah, I put my mechanical hand up, but somebody kept taking it down. I don't know what kind of signal that really means, Erica.
It wasn't me. It wasn't me. I'll tell you that. It wasn't me.
Okay. Hey, but listen, you know, from the very first meeting, I've been talking about we can't not ramp up fast enough to get Black people to work. I haven't seen any evidence from ODOT and anybody that we're doing anything special to put Black people to work today. Obviously, there's some things out there that we could do, but Mr. Modica has laid out something from my very first meeting. I've been on the COAC for 2.5 years saying we have to build a runway before we could take off. I have not seen any evidence of that at all. Megan, I like you, but that's the truth. Other thing is, real quickly, is that I continue to be concerned about the absence of major players in this process, i.e. Prosper Portland. Let me say that again. Prosper Portland, who has all the metrics on what the gaps are for African Americans and where they fall short, what they need to do, what we need to do to build up capacity. They are not at the table. I've not seen them anywhere. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but Megan, you know, that's where Black people live. And Oregon is right here in the city of Portland in the metro area. Why are they not at the table? Explain that to me.
Yeah, and James, to your first point, you're right. I promise that our team is actively working on it, but we have not demonstrated that to you as a COAC or the community on that building the runway. So absolutely are continuing to work on that. Second piece, right now, per a council resolution last summer, the city of Portland is no longer allowed to be engaged in the project. And with Prosper Portland being part of the city, they are currently not at the table. But I will say that through the governor's leadership and conversations over the past weeks around Hybrid 3 and the highway cover decision, with her leadership starting to make some good headway and re-engaging some conversations, at least specifically around the highway cover. So James, that's the why that Prosper Portland is in here.
Yeah, I
Thank you very much.
This conversation was inclusive of the city of Portland, and that was a done deal, that they were at the table, and that we were working cooperatively with the city of Portland. And what you're saying is that's not the case at this point. The IGA is not in place, but you got Commissioner Hardesty up into this business real thick. So explain that to me. I don't get it.
Yep, and I'll be honest, I don't have the answers for you there, James, on that. I know that Commissioner Hardesty has been engaged in the highway cover conversation. We sincerely hope and are looking forward to the city's re-engagement. It's critical, I think, for the success of this project and the outcomes that we and the community are all seeking. And so that's continued work ahead.
Hey, James,
thank you very much.
Sorry, I'll just think, and James, just as we, as you quoted what I said last time, it wasn't, ODOT can't do that alone. Obviously, we can't be the only partner in that, and I know you know that. And that, as Kristen articulated, that is the next step. So I think you're saying the right things, James, and that's where what happens after this process.
Thank you very much, John, and then Estelle.
Thank you. Oh, and again, thank you also, Brendan, for the comment. I was looking at some statistics from the SBA about how they've given out this year 35% less loans to Black small businesses. And I keep looking at our district and I keep saying fire, fire, fire. But that's apparently there must be a different conversation. But I guess the question that I'm having, if we were supposed to arrive to a vote, and believe me, I've been to every meeting that we've had with this process for the last 2 years. And sometimes I think that as a fly on the wall, or I'm a pretty big fly on that wall, but, and I observe some of the practice. And so if we were supposed to move to a vote for this hybrid 3 tonight, do you really think that we kick this and beat this up enough to be able to somehow or another sieve it down to where we could actually see the restorative justice reality of this from this decision? And that's a question, and I'd like to have that one answered tonight for me because, I know sometimes we tend to just pass by some of the statements that I make, but I'm real curious. Do you think we beat this up enough to really get down to the point of restorative justice where we've been able to identify restorative justice within this hybrid 3?
So let me respond to that and go back to what, and then I'll respond first, John, and there'll be several others to respond. The recommendation tonight was to recommend going forward and doing exactly that, to further examine the necessary things that would have to go along with hybrid 3. There has to be some specific thing that's being looked at to be examined and considered. So no, it's not thoroughly ready to say, yeah, it's all green thumbs, and that wasn't the recommendation. The recommendation was to say to continue to move forward, examining this specific hybrid as the option. And so if I missed anything, please add, or wherever you want to add to clarify or further support. If I captured it, Megan, I know you introduced it, and so.
Yeah, you're spot on, Dr. Holt. Thank you for that.
Okay, so there's an assumption that we have other options. It sounds as if we have other options than the hybrid 3.
This was in response to the recommendation of the governor that hybrid 3 was the win-win resolution out of all of the work as identified in our meeting where Shannon recapped how we got here, how we got to hybrid 3, with hybrid 3 being the answer to pursue. And so the recommendation would have been, and so if it wasn't clearly articulated, let me try to articulate it at this moment. If I misstated, somebody help correct it. The recommendation was around recommending continuing forward with hybrid 3 as the option. And it wasn't to ignore any of the concerns or to skip over any of the elements that need to be thoroughly fleshed out. It was to give us a direction as the best solution for forward motion.
And again, I'm assuming that there's no other options. Do we have other options?
I'll chime in if I may, Dr. Holt. I think the answer is no.
Please.
I think the answer is no. I think this was a compromise option. I can certainly speak for the governor's office, and but what I can say is I think the governor pulled together a number of the key stakeholders, and this was the best option I think many of the voices around the table could come up with, given the facts on the ground. And so, as Dr. Holt indicated, the exercise this evening was to get HAAB's reaction as to whether or not folks were comfortable advancing this option.
So then we don't have no other options. We just got hybrid 3, and that's what we're going to go with, right? So what seems to be the big decision-making problem here?
So I respond to that. I don't know if anyone else, I don't want to just jump in.
I guess I will jump in, and maybe it's a question back to you, Dr. Holt, and the HAAB. So knowing that we have 12 active HAAB members and there's only 4 or 5 of you in this space now, Erica can confirm that for me. As our representatives this evening, are you comfortable moving forward? And should we proceed with the HAAB recommendation with the 4 to 5 that we have?
Are you asking that question to me, Megan?
I guess I'm asking it back to our facilitators. I'll just note that in the charter, we actually do not have a quorum requirement, but out of respect for the HAAB, an acknowledgement that we only have a limited number of people, I just want to put that question into the space. And I recognize it's a bit of an awkward one to ask in front of everyone here, but I think it's one necessary to ask given where we are.
And that question is specifically to HAAB members.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you
So we've got Estelle.
I see Mr. Monique's
Estelle
hand.
and Monique, yes, Estelle first, please.
I answered in chat, sorry. I think we should wait because it's in the charter to have quorum. And I mean, it's not in the charter? No?
Not for a quorum,
No, it's not in the charter.
I think to show respect that we should wait. It's such there's 4 of us here out of 12. I mean, that's not even half the people.
And just so you keep in mind, just not to interrupt anyone, but my questions were not necessarily to accelerate the vote. The question was, y'all made it sound as if we had other options. And there weren't any other options. So I was just curious as to, why the process. And for me, most importantly, have we been able to identify any of the restorative justice realities along with this hybrid 3? Have we been able to identify what that's going to look like along with this? Because it's one thing to pick the hybrid, but I was hearing Holt also say, well, that's the next steps after we decide on which one of these hybrids we. But for me, it's just refining the reality of what the restorative justice was going to look like along with this decision.
I'll step in, and I think, Mr. Washington, the question on the table tonight is really around, is there agreement to move hybrid 3 forward? As Janelle articulated, there were conversations to come to consensus. And so I think that really the charge of our next steps is, if hybrid 3 is the option we're moving forward, how do we make hybrid 3 the best that it can be? How do we make hybrid 3 achieve the most restorative justice elements as defined by the community that we can? And so I think that's the next step. But in order to answer those questions, the first step is, do we agree that hybrid 3 is the recommendation to move forward with the transportation?
And what I keep responding to you is you keep talking about that as if we got other options. And to me, it's just become a moot point. I mean, we're discussing it like as if we have 3 other options. In other words, do we have another option other than this? If we said no,
so the only thing being, to your point, John, this was the conversation, the consideration. So there is no other option, as John L. just highlighted. And so your point is well taken. I want to hear from. Yeah. So
okay, we can move on now. Posey, I get what you were saying about yeah. You want to cut you off. But that's all right.
Steve, Megan, can I ask a question?
I need you to hold on one second, Nate.
Okay.
We're going to follow our protocol. Thanks.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Mr. Modica.
Yeah, I wanted to circle back around and, my thoughts are that we should respect our board members who are not here. We've experienced moving forward previously, and now we have one-way streets and they're congested with bicycles and pedestrians, and it's as if we woke up one morning and the direction and the population of our streets have changed. But I would say this, and I don't know if it's appropriate, might we be able to take a poll of the members who are here, not a vote, but a poll? And that might be helpful for moving forward.
Thank you. Great suggestion. I will come back to the HAAB and put in your hand, Erica, to process that process. Before we do that, Bryson, if you have a comment, and then Nate.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly touch on the restorative justice piece, in that, the way I've been thinking about this, and if I'm totally off base here, someone can step in and and let me know. But this is just the kind of the first step in several different steps to getting to the restorative justice ends, right? We're determining kind of what the starting slate is going to be, and then the next steps we need to be engaged in the process, figuring out what kind of development and how the development goes on the caps. We need to make sure that we follow and keep a watch on ODOT and keep ODOT honest when they say that they're engaging members of the community in the work. And all of the restorative justice elements, I think, will play out in the next phases of the project. And what we're just deciding on today is what we think the template will be, where we can kind of maximize that restorative justice lens, not make the final decision on all the different components.
Thank you, Bryson. Appreciate your comments there. I would say yes, that is no matter whatever cover decision is made, the work to do the restorative justice, to drill down, all of that is what comes in the iterative processes. And so, Nate?
Yep, I was just going to kind of echo what Modica said, that polling should be a consideration. And if I remember correctly, maybe Megan can help answer this. When you deal with the feds and you deal with some of our legislators, they actually like to see that projects have some consensus from community, as well as just shovel ready, meaning that the design needs to be to a point where you can actually have real numbers. So I think that's part of the exercise tonight, is just to at least elaborate on where we can get to, so that there's one general direction, because there is an option of stuff just not happening because we can't get a design, through the community and supported by the community. Would that be an accurate statement, Megan?
I think at a high level that is accurate. Yes.
So I appreciate what Estelle and Modica said. I do think it would be nice, John, if you let those others just also weigh in. But I think, to your point, I know that wasn't your point. But I'm just saying, I think to your point and theirs, it'd be nice to get a temperature check tonight, share that with the other 8 folks, and then they might feel the same way, and we're moving forward. I'm just a little tired of these continued conversations where we're just not moving forward. And I think I'd love
to respect that.
Move forward.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it. Brendan?
Thanks, Dr. Holt. I just, so some of what's driving, obviously, I think we talked in one of our last meetings that the OTC was going to take up this decision in July. That was going to be in the schedule. They moved that to early September. That's why we're all getting together in August. And it's tough to find a quorum because it's a tough time of year. Obviously, people are doing things with family and friends, enjoying vacations. So I've heard a lot, and I know the COAC members. I see Mr. McFerrin nodding his head, and Mr. Posey, others, about the timing issue. And Nate, you just mentioned it too. So the OTC is set to make a decision here in the first week of September. Getting ahead of myself. So that's coming upon us quickly. So that is just something to keep in mind of why we're getting together here tonight and trying to move forward on a recommendation from the Historic Environment Advisory Board. And then Mr. Washington, obviously a lot of work. I know you were at some of these tables, came in to look at all the different options, and they were all on the table, but there was a lot of work that was done around hybrid 3 that had looked at all those different options in those meetings, and I guess tonight was more about like what was the thinking of that? Is that something you want to recommend? Not as far as not as much boxing things in, but I understand and appreciate that sentiment in your comments there. So that's kind of the reasons, something to keep in mind of why we might want to make a recommendation tonight, or however the HAAB decides to do it to respect the other members. But we did hear loud and clear from a lot of people that moving forward is a very important piece to this and moving this project to the next stage. So that's kind of some of the things I just wanted to put on the table that's driving the importance of maybe moving to a recommendation tonight that HAAB members are comfortable with.
Thank you, sir. Miss Erica, I'm going to put in your hands to do a warming poll, straw poll, pulse check,
Sure.
whatever term you want to use.
Indeed. Prior to that, I saw two hands. So Pastor Probasco, I saw you, and I also saw Estelle. Pastor Richard, were you unmuting to give a comment?
Yes, I wanted to just say just a few things. Unfortunately, I missed the last meeting. So coming into our discussion today, I think it's important for me just to that's the reason why I was just sitting back and listening to all the various comments that were made. I believe that it would be nice to have somewhat of a pulse check. At the same time, I think it's very important that we've had many conversations about restorative justice. And we use the terminology and everyone gets passionate about it as far as that's concerned. But I have not heard one practical example of what it looks like. It's a terminology that we've used incessantly, and it's very frustrating. I know we want to have more Black participation. We want to have we want people involved in the Black community, and even with the selection of the covers and this type of thing, what it's going to look like. And the thing we never get around to is who's going to pay for it? Where's the money coming from? And so it's this circle we go around and around. And quite frankly, I'm dizzy because we end up at the same place we did when we started the conversation. Now, I also appreciate what the governor has done and brought it to this particular place where we did have something before so we can make a decision. And I'm saying from what has been presented to us, I mean, if you want my poll, yeah, I want to move forward. I want to move forward on this, but I'm not forgetting about the restorative justice piece. And we have to have a really good conversation about what we're asking for, where we're getting the money from, and how we move forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Pastor Richard. Estelle, did you want to give your comment prior?
Sorry for talking so much. I just had one more thing to say about restorative justice too. If we don't have transparency about the conversations that are happening, there's no way that this will be restorative, because restorative justice means including everybody in the process, right? That hasn't been included before. So there has to be transparency in the process. If there's people over here having this happen while we're doing, running our circles round and round, and yeah, we are, I'm tired too, then that's not restorative justice, because there could be something happening over here that's going to happen, and we're going to get left behind or left out and silenced. And we don't want to be harmed again, right? That's what we're fighting against. So it's very important that I don't know who we need to talk to or what we need to do to make sure that we are not left out of these conversations, that we see everything that's being presented to other conversations that are being had, that we continue to be included in this process, because that's what we're fighting for. And that's what restorative justice is being included in the process that we have been left out historically. And also, one more thing is we can go ahead and restore the grid. We can build 10-story buildings on top of the caps. But, if we don't have control of the property and we don't have the right programs, then displacement and gentrification is going to continue. And, and that might be something that's already being worked on. Again, we wouldn't know. But I would hope that we would be part of that conversation too, about developing programs and developing who's in control of that property, because we have already begun those conversations within committees that people have been a part of, and we're eager to be a part of that work as legacy families and people who have connections. These three committees represent a broad selection of the community and have connections beyond. And I would really hope that, and I say this every meeting, that the displaced community of Albina is considered in everything that we do. I haven't heard that mentioned a lot, that we're doing outreach, because that's who's hurting, that's who was displaced, That's when our job rates went down. That's when our home ownership went down and has not recovered since. So that's who needs to be considered in our decisions. Thanks.
I certainly appreciate this. I would offer, because many of us have such a deep-rooted thought about what has happened and that we don't want it to happen to us again. But I want to suggest, let us not get into a moral panic today, because we're not going to forget about the restorative justice and community safety issues, but we've got to have as we said earlier, a poll, a temperature check, put our toes in the water. Where do we who are on this call today, where are our preferences given the intercession by Governor Brown and the organizations that she and her staff brought together? Because I also want to respect that. And I do believe that as we go forward from this portion of what's to be considered, that rather than a moral panic, as I said earlier, then we have the opportunity to drill down, get to the granular level. I was very excited to hear the comment about disaggregating the data, because our community population has changed and will continue to change. And then there's some things that, you know, the facts are, do I want to own property on top of a lid, or do I want a home that retains its value? Those are places that we're going to get to, but I've got to say, it seems to me that hybrid 3 is the consensus amongst different organizations. It might even be considered a radical consensus, but it is a consensus, and I just believe we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Modica. With that being said, thank you all for leaning into this. I think this is why we've convened these groups. This is why you're here in this space. And hearing recommendations from this body. I'm going to ask HAAB members, I think, again, let's be clear, we are, Ms. Natalie, you can go ahead and bring up slide number 30. Our desire here is to get a pulse. We are asking current, the Historic Albina Advisory Board members first who are in the room. Do you agree that hybrid 3 be recommended to the Oregon Transportation Committee? I'm going to ask you your yes, potentially your yes and, or if you do not recommend. And so I will start with, I did receive in writing from Andrew Clark prior to him leaving the meeting to head to a work obligation. He is in favor of moving forward with hybrid 3 and would like to give his yes on that. So then I will move to Mr. Modica.
I thoroughly appreciated the opportunity to participate and hope that participation is offered as we continue on. My choice is that we move forward on hybrid 3. A lot of work has been put into getting to that as a decision point. So I am a yes.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Estelle, I'm going to move to you. I saw you in the chat, but since you're in the meeting, I'd give you an opportunity to voice.
Yes, I support 3.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Pastor Richard Probasco?
I would say yes.
Thank you, sir. Mr. John Washington?
Drum roll, please. No, I'm just You know, I think, well, with all the options that I have, I think I'm going to choose this one. All right. And I agree. It should move forward.
Thank you, sir. So currently, with the HAAB members who were participating in the meeting today, we have 5. I would suggest that I make personal contact with the remaining HAAB members. I believe the plan was for us to have a written recommendation to the Executive Steering Committee. And I think that that still is our goal moving forward, and that those who have things that they'd like to contribute in writing to the process will be able to do that. So it's my understanding that we have consensus from the HAAB, and I'll turn this over to Dr. Holt.
Thank you very much. Thanks everybody for leaning into the conversation. Now, our best laid plans of mice and men, right? Provided we had enough HAAB members present, then we would move forward to hearing the recommendation or the determination, and then move forward to the Executive Steering Committee. Since we do not have a number that we're comfortable with to move forward with a recommendation to the Executive Steering Committee, that will be forthcoming. So we will have another touch point where the Executive Steering Committee could weigh in. But we will give an opportunity if there are any Executive Steering Committee members who would like to share their perspective tonight. So, and I'll just do that generally. I'm not going to go through and call you name by name. So if there are Executive Steering Committee members who would like to weigh in, please do so. So Steve, I see your hand up first.
No, I thought the meeting was going to falter there for a minute. I just really appreciate everybody hanging in there, and a pretty robust conversation. And as I said before about, we're just setting the minimums here on construction participation. This is just the beginning in terms of a much richer conversation that I look forward to participating in. So it was good to be with you tonight. Thank you. And I look forward to our turn as executive committee members to wrestle with these questions too, and encourage everyone's participation in that meeting. So thank you.
Thank you, Bryson Davis.
So we gathered these groups together to address the issue of the initial plan not meeting the objectives that we discussed that were our objectives for this project. And I think hybrid 3 really is the best compromise between getting the work started as soon as possible, getting the contractors that we're wanting to get to work as soon as possible, and maximizing the ability for the next part of the project to bring in the long-term development components that could add to those goals. And so I'm definitely at this point in full support of hybrid 3.
Thank you very much. And let me articulate something that I may have not been clear on, that it's been clear within the heartbeat of the Executive Steering Committee to elevate the voices of the Historic Albina Advisory Board, and the Executive Steering Committee not getting out in front of community members. And so by no means am I asking us to make a determination without hearing from the Historic Albina Advisory Board. I am giving space for Executive Steering Committee members who may want to weigh in with their thoughts based on the conversation that we've been having. So I want to be clear on that. President Peterson.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank both the COAC and the HAAB members who have put so much time and energy into this, and recognizing that you want to have a full voice when you make your recommendation. I want to thank you for that. And also just for allowing us to crash your meetings for the last several months. It has made a big difference in being able to hear and understand and follow whatever recommendation, whatever issues are still yet to be resolved. And we continue to remain committed to resolving those. Thank you.
Thank you, President Peterson. Nate McCoy.
I want to echo President Peterson's remarks and thanking the COAC and the HAAB. I also want to just, thank the facilitators. Certainly appreciate Erica and Stephen for all their efforts along this journey together, ODOT as well. And for our community, I just want y'all to hear me as one voice on the ESC that I hope when you make your recommendations that you also include your and. Because I think as it's been many times said, we've lost a lot of times in our community when we haven't gotten agreement on what we need to be successful. So I hope it's not just hybrid 3 as an option you recommend, but including your ands. So I would hope to see something that also includes a little bit more of the community impact we all want to see. So appreciate you all this evening and look forward to those recommendations as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Brendan.
Yeah, no, just a lot of echoing there. And there seems to be a lot of agreement. I've been in a lot of meetings over the years. And this one, considering what we're talking about and all the work that we put in, there seems to be a lot of agreement here. I remember in one of our meetings, our first ones, I said, we got to lead with the HAAB. They got to be the first ones to weigh in. They have. I appreciate that. I've had a lot of discussions with a lot of members over these past few months and appreciate all the work they did in to come here and be where we are tonight. And I just want to say I appreciate that. I think as an ESC member, and I'm hearing from the majority of the members here, they appreciate that work, appreciate what's gone into hybrid 3 and the opportunity that we have here, but also the discussions that still need to be had. And the things that need to put into place, Mr. Posey, that's just not going to be forgotten, as we know it needs to happen. So what I'm hearing from my members here, so I guess I'm looking because I've also heard a lot. If I could speak for my COAC colleagues, I think you'd be saying kind of move forward. So it sounds like that's where we are tonight. So Dr. Holt, Erica, I want to also just make sure and give you the respectful space as the one facilitating this. That's where I'm feeling that we are. So I'm just want to make sure we're at that point and if there's a level of comfort there as we move forward to that OTC meeting.
Thank you, Brendan, and everyone's work tonight. As you can see, the space that's been created is very necessary for us to do what we did and to work through the process. We'll go back just briefly to the principles of agreement. And one of those is experiencing discomfort. And it's interesting to me how many people don't like discomfort and want to bail in the midst of the uncomfortable moment. You're never going to get to growth. We're never going to get to the work. We're never going to get things through if we keep bailing when things become uncomfortable. Nor are we going to be able to do the work that we need to do on this particular project if we aren't willing to work through discomfort. And so by no means is there one specific strategy or answer that's going to meet all the needs or address all the issues. It just doesn't exist. There's going to be some give and there's going to be some take. And that's part of the work that we're doing in this space. I will also add that part of our work and the joy that we have as facilitators is to try to make sure that the conversation happens. And that means that there are other voices in the space that are being heard. And while jokingly, there are folks who say, I cut them off. Well, that's part of my job, is to make sure that we've got space for people to be heard. It's not personal. It's not directed at you. It is to make sure that we keep order and structure because of the fact that we're dealing with something that is so impassioned and so invested and so connected. So please don't ever take it personally. It's the work that we do to make sure that our voices are being heard. I will wrap up things in just a moment, but Mr. John L. Bell.
Thank you, Dr. Holt, and I appreciate everyone's perspective. Not to beat a dead horse, but a little bit of facilitator privilege here. I just want to make sure, particularly on behalf of COAC, who I know is very interested in making sure our rhetoric is meeting action. Could we just clarify in terms of what the next steps are? My understanding is the HAAB still needs time to react. I think we've heard from 4 members tonight who have indicated they are comfortable with advancing hybrid number 3. Did not hear clearly from members of the ESC as to whether or not they were concurring with the 4 HAAB members that were here. But I think it's going to be really, really important for us to lay out what the next steps are so that everyone who leaves here tonight is clear in terms of what next steps are. And so perhaps I yield to Brendan to kind of perhaps lay out those next steps, or you and Dr. Holt and Erica. Maybe you can help clarify.
Well, John L., you are doing what facilitators do. That's where we were headed. Slide 35. We don't have to bring it up. It just says next steps. I don't know if Brendan or Megan wants to weigh in. You identified one, and that is we need to hear from the other HAAB members. And then from that is the recommendation to the Executive Steering Committee for the Executive Steering Committee to react. And the goal is for the Executive Steering Committee to react to the entire recommendation from the HAAB, according to our process. Megan, Brendan, did you want to add anything, or Erica?
I'll just weigh in. It's my understanding based on the charter and based on the polling that we did tonight. We have 5 HAAB members who were in the meeting this evening who wanted to move forward with option 3. Hybrid 3, excuse me. Not to minimize those who were absent this evening. It would be my understanding we would be reaching to them to get their concurrence. And if there are additional written comments that need to be included, I would be utilizing the team to help formalize a written recommendation based on consensus from this evening that hybrid 3 is the option we would recommend to the OTC.
So, Sister Warren, if I may interject,
Yes, sir.
I want this to have a lot of transparency.
Yes, sir.
As you reach to those who were tasked with something else this evening, my feeling would be to call a meeting, not just say those of us that were here said this, because that then gives the feeling of a vote and it gives a feeling of marginalization. So I would suggest the next step is for us to have a HAAB meeting, run over the road again, take an official vote, because tonight was a poll.
I'm in favor of that, Ms. Modica. Thank you for your input there. I'm seeing
Megan or Brendan?
Yeah, indeed.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, in terms of next steps, I do think, well, we do need the ESC to weigh in, and based on the conversation from the HAAB, recognizing we only have several of the members having that touch point is going to be important there. But given that we have a number of the ESC members here, perhaps it makes sense to also do a sense of concurrence with ESC and just where we stand tonight. But moving forward in terms of process, post recommendation from the HAAB and the ESC, we were going to put together a written recommendation that would then be shared back with members of the ESC and the HAAB to make sure that we got it right in the writing. And then that would be shared as part of the Oregon Transportation Commission packet of information as they take up their recommendation in the first week of September. And so as we look to another touch point, we will need to be mindful of that first week of September meeting date of the OTCs convening.
Yes. I want to yield to Mr. Posey first, but I do have a next step piece when we get after Mr. Posey.
Yeah, I just noticed that you know, you all didn't poll the COAC. Are we chopped liver? Y'all didn't ask us whether or not we had a consensus or not. You know, I mean, we're the longest formed committee of all of them, and y'all never asked us whether we have a consensus or not. But that's okay. I get it.
Amen.
I'm just saying we're not chopped liver here, you know. So
no, Mr. Posey, let me address that, and I'll give it to your facilitator to do just that. Thank you.
Okay, right. I would be happy to ask COAC in terms of where you stand. If you're in support of hybrid 3 or concur with the HAAB members, please indicate by using your raised hand features. And then those who do not have your hand raised, I'll call on to hear your commentary. So use your raised hand feature if you're in support of hybrid 3.
Is it possible to ask a question?
Yes, feel free to ask a question, and then I just want to make sure that I'm capturing everyone. So just from what I'm seeing in terms of COAC, Mr. Posey, I don't see your reaction.
Yeah, I put my hands up. Somebody keeps taking my hands down.
Okay.
I don't know what's up, what that's about.
All right.
They
All
don't
right.
like
So
me.
I'm seeing a majority concurrence by the COAC and support. Michael Birch.
Yeah, I was really curious, but James beat me to the point. As we sit here for 2.5 hours and come to a point where we want a straw poll, the COAC wasn't even mentioned by any of the folks that were facilitating. I was beginning to think all the meetings I'd been to didn't really count. So, I mean, to say, okay, now I'm going to include you, was it an oversight?
No, let me clarify that.
Please.
The COAC charter is specific to the workforce and the DBE participation, whereas the HAAB's charter is very much focused on what happens in terms of the lids. And so it's not in our charter, it's not in COAC's charter to really react or respond with respect to a vote on this particular item. What we wanted to do was make sure that COAC's perspectives were integrated into the overall discussion, but that we were staying true to our respective charters.
I just let me finish my thought here. That would have been really good to hear up front when you were asking for ESC and HAAB. You had said, COAC, this isn't in your charter, so you won't be asked. I would have been sitting here wondering, I was stuck, quite frankly. I couldn't go any further until I figured that out, but Posey asked the question. Right. Now you clarified it, so thank you.
I think that's a fair critique and well noted. What I would like to do, not to put our ESC members on the hook, but I think it would be helpful now that our community has weighed in for the ESC folks to give us their straw poll as to where they are.
Well, maybe let me make this. How about I make a suggestion here, Mr. Bell, based on just what I've been hearing here. These things are never easy, but let me just throw something out there, just based on what I'm hearing tonight. And I think that was unanimous by the COAC for support for hybrid 3. We had HAAB members that are present, each feeling moving forward with hybrid 3 was the right thing to do. I heard that from the comments, the consensus comments from ESC members that was also the direction as well. How about a suggestion here being, we all wanted to meet with the HAAB. We've heard this. How about that the ESC consensus stands unless we hear back from HAAB and they have a special meeting or however we want to choreograph that, Erica, to have them, if they feel that it's that the ESC needs to revisit this based on comments or things you're hearing, then we could come back and do that. But therefore, we would be moving forward. I also want to put this to the HAAB members to make sure that's okay, because I was on the record saying you should be the first to weigh in, but just want to make sure as we kind of think about some timing issues that would be and also my ESC members, if anyone had any issue with that, that would move forward in that direction. So open to comments on that, whether it's a good or bad idea, just throwing it out there based on the situation and circumstances that are before us this evening.
Thanks, Brendan. I appreciate that.
Dr. Holt, I'm not sure what specifically, I'm sorry, I lost track, Brendan, of what you were putting out there. This is Lynn.
Yeah, so no kind of up and down vote here. There seems to be consensus amongst the ESC around moving forward with hybrid 3. HAAB members have made a vote that we can communicate to the OTC that was, considering we do have a critical mass here of ESC members, that moving forward is with the hybrid is the right option. But that we will also respect the fact that if the HAAB members that have not weighed in, if they weigh in and feel that we need to reconsider that would be, that we will come back and do that. At least that's what I'm throwing out there for consideration, just because of the issues we had around quorum tonight that were unexpected.
So no real ask of the ESC and no straw poll per se. Again, my effort was to give the opportunity if anyone wanted to weigh in as an executive steering committee member, understanding that we are not taking the input as the formal recommendation, that this was very much a poll. Is that helpful at all, President Peterson?
Yeah, except for if, as Nate had mentioned, I don't think any of us are in a position to say hybrid 3, bottom line, done deal, no question, no further questions, Your Honor, right? The way I would need to have that discussion based on what I'm hearing from the HAAB, and I kind of need to hear what the, even whether they're for hybrid 3 or not, and then if they are for hybrid 3, what the and is, because I'm pretty sure that there are a lot of ands, and we have started the list of ands and kept track of the list of ands, and I would want to make sure that we have a full list of the additional things that need to be met in order for that scenario to work. So I just want to be clear that just because there's a letter supporting hybrid 3, there's also a letter supporting hybrid 3 with a lot of ands, and that list could grow based on the HAAB's recommendation.
Thank you. Yes. Once we have the formal recommendation, then the ESC will be responding to that appropriately. And so all parties of the Executive Steering Committee, prepare yourselves to be ready to weigh in with a determination, a decision, a support, or whatever position. So that is forthcoming and will be soon. Senior servant, sir.
For me?
Pastor Matt Hennessy.
Thank you so much, brother, Dr. Holt, and to all of you. I am definitely going to start using a lighter colored hand, because I'm finding that the brown color does not get recognized. No, I put my information in the chat. I just wanted to make sure that in case those of you who miss it, I graduated from the James Posey School of Zoom Meeting Restraint. So I have not said a word the whole meeting. James has spoken for me and everybody, but I do think that it is important. We certainly saw that this was a meeting specifically for HAAB tonight, and that it wasn't, I got the impression that it wasn't about our input, but I think if those things are emphasized more, I know I might have made a different 2.5 hour decision tonight. I'm glad I'm here. I do support, whether it's needed or not, the hybrid 3. I think a lot of work has gone into all of the different options that were before us. And my hope is that the HAAB members, when they have their meeting, they will also be positive about this, and prayerfully we can move forward. And I'm grateful to know when the OTC is going to meet, if that date and time can be a reminder out for all of us, I think that'd be helpful. But I certainly want to thank the facilitators and all of you who are here tonight, and certainly the representatives of ODOT, et cetera. And I'm always grateful to say something about my brother, the mayor, James Posey.
Thank you, Dr. Hennessy. We appreciate that. Mr. Posey, I saw you on mute.
Yeah, I'm having a little issue with this because I'm not seeing all these committees as being equal. When I look at the executive steering committee and what you all's charter is, seems to me that you all have a higher responsibility to look at these inputs and make a rational decision. We're never going to have total consensus on everything. Now, I haven't been in a situation where everybody's agreed on everything, but at the end of the day, what's executive steering committee mean? You got to make some executive decisions based upon a broader consensus. I see you all's role is bigger than the other committees here. So I could be wrong. I've been wrong before, but at the end of the day, we need to move this project forward. And that's what executives do, is they make decisions and they move a project forward. So I'm having a little problem with this piece about going back and forth. The HAAB is here. Obviously, they got issues and concerns, but 5 of them were there. Erica's going to get with them and try to figure out what they're thinking. But at the end of the day, why are we doing this? I don't get it. So, that's what my comment. We just need to move forward on what the executive steering committee comes to a conclusion on. That's me. I'm sorry.
Thank you, sir. Brendan?
Yeah, Mr. Posey, we hear that. And I think to do that, we should make some deadlines here. By the end of the week, have the rest of the HAAB, those that can weigh in. I heard from my colleagues on the committee today that we're comfortable moving forward. Pastor Hennessy, the meeting is, appreciate the comments as always. The meeting should be the first week of September. So there really is just not much time. And we all know how the end of August gets here. It's tough to get people around the table. So Mr. Posey, I'm feeling that we do that. And what I was trying to suggest was a little framework to do so. We'll give a deadline if my committee members are okay with that to have weigh in by the end of the week. But from what I've heard tonight, it's been concurrence from the executive steering committee, and we can take that forward to the OTC.
Why don't y'all do a straw poll tonight, just so we can see what the flavor is? Brendan.
Well, everyone we were kind of doing it by consensus. I didn't know if everyone wanted to vote. And I want to appreciate Pastor Hennessy's comment that he just put in the chat.
Absolutely. I will again emphasize that the process for the Executive Steering Committee is to elevate the voices of the Historic Albina Advisory Board. And so the Executive Steering Committee, and you are correct, Mr. Posey, it's exactly what executive means. Ultimately, it does come through the Executive Steering Committee, but in meetings, I don't think that the COAC was present. It was clearly communicated that the voice of the HAAB is what's going to be elevated, and the Executive Steering Committee will be working to support what the HAAB has articulated. And so having specific straw poll at this point could or could not have significant variance depending on the ultimate voice of what the HAAB has to say. So, President Peterson?
I agree with a lot of the comments that we need to get moving. I agree with the fact that there's not a majority of HAAB members here, and I'd like to hear from all of them. So I guess, Dr. Holt, how do we schedule an emergency HAAB meeting in prompt order so that it is transparent and accountable? But also, how do we schedule a ESC meeting to quickly follow up on that with so that we can add to the list of so
so we can have a full, complete list and recommendation to the OTC in time.
Thank you very much. That is where I was headed with our next steps. And so just to clarify, for those who may not know how the ESC's charter is set, the recommendation of the HAAB is what will then direct the action of the Executive Steering Committee. And so there's no resistance to giving an executive direction. It will be commensurate to or in agreement with what the HAAB does. So our next step is to convene the HAAB and then the Executive Steering Committee, and it will be done post haste as quickly as possible. We will articulate the dates for the HAAB, the Executive Steering Committee. The proposed date for the Oregon Transportation Commission meeting is, I believe, September 9th. And so we will work to get all of these meetings done concurrent and executed within the appropriate timeline, also to make sure that all the members, the various committees that are represented, are informed with the decision. So what the HAAB determines will be shared, what the Executive Steering Committee presents will be shared with each of the committees. Did I leave anything out? Megan, would you add anything? Brendan, would you add anything? Erica, would you add anything? Janelle?
You have captured it from my perspective, Dr. Holt. Thank you.
All right. Yes, Nate.
Quick comment before we end tonight, and I think some of the people who have been on these committees for a long time might appreciate this, and this might just be part of that next step. Stephen Hope just throwing the idea out there. What if we, as part of the recommendation from the HAAB, and maybe COAC can even still weigh in once the full HAAB has caught up and had a follow-up meeting, and maybe come up with a plan to address some of the comments that James Posey mentioned earlier, where maybe some of the HAAB committee becomes some of the future development committee that is structured with what we do moving forward, as well as maybe the COAC, who has spent a lot of their time talking about workforce and training and contracting, get maybe another committee set up, and you actually stipend these people to actually put a plan together. And maybe that can be part of the recommendations that's also offered to ODOT and to the ESC, that I'm sure Bryson and Lynn and others would probably appreciate and approve as well. And we actually have that be part of that and that I was speaking to earlier, so that people that want to continue and stay engaged can actually be a part of an agreement where they actually get a stipend and they actually continue to support community and the impacts that Estelle and many others talked about tonight. So if that could be a consideration, Steve, please move that forward. I see a couple of thumbs coming up already. So I just think that'd be a good way, so people who have been a part of this for a long time, just their time could be more valued and maybe get a stipend. That sounds like restorative justice to me. So I just wanted to echo that before we end tonight.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And thanks for everyone's investment tonight. And let me say to COAC members, by no means were you discounted, overlooked, or devalued. Your voice, the intent early on, if you remember a few months ago, we talked about having spaces where all the committees came together so that we could do this work in live time and capture thoughts and capture your input, because it's so important, because it's so significant, and because we're trying to do business differently. And so whether or not you see it, this is part of the restorative justice. This is doing business differently. It hasn't been done like this historically. And so by no means have you been diminished, devalued, or dismissed. So thank you very much for giving your 2.5 hours into this space. We appreciate you. Everybody have a great night. Tonight, we will be back together soon. You will have the notes from our meeting, and you will know and be notified of the next opportunity. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.